Welcome, Commanders. This is Brightwood from Oracle Station, bringing you our crew analysis of Enterprise E data. Enterprise E data was introduced into a Star Trek Fleet Command with the release of M60 and the TNG ARC Make It So, released to us in November of 2023. Because of this, you may hear Enterprise E data referenced as MIS data or MIS data, but I will reference him based upon his in-game group Enterprise E, or for short, E data. Enterprise E data is a rare officer in-game. His division is Science, his faction is Federation, and his in-game group, as I indicated already, is Enterprise E. Data's captain's maneuver is Chain of Command. This indicates that Data does not have a captain's maneuver. Equipping this officer as the captain of a ship provides no benefit. Personally, I don't see any issues with him not having a captain's maneuver. This version of Data really never had official command assignment. Enterprise E Data does have an officer ability though, and that is Saddle Up, Lock and Load. This ability increases isolated cascade damage by a base of 10% versus non-armada hostiles. This goes up to 40% at Commander, which is significant. Isolated cascade multiplies your total damage, including isolatic damage and all research and other bonuses, and then adds it to your isolatic damage. Interestingly, there is no call out for the trigger, so this appears to be a on-round start, meaning there's no requirement on triggering the increase to isolate cascade. The only call out is that the target must be a non-armada hostile. Enterprise E Data's below the deck ability is Appropriate Adjustments, and this increases your ship's max cargo by 20% at base, going up to 70% at Commander. It's always nice to get a cargo bump officer if you can leverage your full cargo. Otherwise, there is not much value here. But I can say leveraging him on your Mantis to bump your cargo up even more, or on your Voyager mining anomaly samples, are two good potential uses for his below the deck ability. Because Data is a rare officer, he only has 2 ATA traits, and those traits are Analytical and Android. This is a high-level review of ATAs. To really understand the value of Enterprise E data for your ATA needs, you will want to review the ATAs he's eligible for and determine their value to you. You can do this with the amazing officer tool put together by Stewie Doo and Loop. The link to the tool is in the Oracle Station's Discord. So please come join us in Discord to get this officer tool and access to additional resources for Star Trek Fleet Command. Now let's get into Enterprise E Data's away team missions. There is more than a handful of officers with the Analytical ATA trait, so Data just increases that list by one more potential officer for this trait. There are several ATAs that use the Analytical trait, and those are Arbiter of Succession, Calculated Treachery, Explore Galactic Barrier, Forensic Investigation, Investigate Borg Signal, Observing Kolinar, Senate Hearing, and Tactical Simulator, and this scales based upon your ops. Some of these are very good ATAs, but at this point you may already have a preferred set of officers you run on all of these ATAs. And with Data only being a rare officer, it's going to be hard to spend your earned ATA experience on Data for these. Several of these have good faction rewards though, And if you do not have a good analytical officer to use, you may find data is actually valuable to you. But there is a good chance he may be added to your primary or secondary hostile grinding crew, and because of this you may not want to invest ATA XP into data. Android. Now this ATA trait is where Enterprise E data becomes a little more appealing when it comes to ATA traits. There's only one other very hard to source officer with the Android trait, and that is the TNG data. There are two ATAs that take the Android trait. They are Planetside Shipyard and Salvage Operations for Explorer parts. Planetside Shipyard is a 5-day ATA and gives you ship parts if you crit it. I, however, still can't justify sending officers off on 5-day ATAs for the rewards we get. Salvage Operations that Enterprise E data works on will give you Explorer parts and is only a 1-day ATA. You now have a more valuable officer giving you the opportunity to put a crew member for all 3 traits on this ATA, improving your chances to crit it. I find this ATA far more valuable and may warrant you investing into Data's ATA traits. Oracle Station is going to rate Enterprise E Data's interest in ATAs as a medium. The only reason he isn't a low is because of his Android trait alone and the current rareness of officers available with that trait. So now that we've ran through Enterprise E Data's profile, what do we think are his advantages and disadvantages before we get into actual application or using him on our crews? First, advantages. His increase to Isolated Cascade is a good amount. It activates the start of combat, his Android trait for ATAs, and the cargo capacity increase to base is decent when he's below the deck. His disadvantages are he's limited to hostiles only for Isolated Cascade increase. Data seems to be more beneficial than not. His abilities are decent in PVE activities, and right now in the game at Ensign, his Isolated Cascade boost is noticeable. So far, Enterprise E Data seems like a decent rare officer on paper to have on our list of options for crew. It will be interesting to see what the crew we get in Part 2 will bring to tie together the performance of the group. If they do that at all, Data can stand on his own with his officer ability. I think that we will put that theory to test in the next section of this video. And if your server row will let you take advantage of his below the deck ability, his increase to your base max cargo size will be useful for those loot grinding activities, especially ones in token lock systems. Now let's look at how we can put Data to work for us. Enterprise E Data is a PvE only officer. Commanders should find benefit in using Data in an officer's chair on the bridge. And because he's in a side chair on the bridge means that you don't necessarily have to have synergy for him to perform effectively. And under the right circumstances, commanders should also find benefit in using him in the lower decks. Enterprise E Data should be a relatively easy drop-in replacement for some of our officers in our existing crew builds, replacing the officer that is either the lowest performing or most restrictive on their use. Because his below the deck is very straightforward, we'll take a look at how we can effectively use him below the deck to maximize our cargo capacity. Again, using Enterprise E data below the deck is going to be very simple. All we need to do is put him below the deck, but we want to give you ideas on an optimal way to use him below the deck for specific activities. I'm going to show you 2 activities that I find I get benefit out of putting Enterprise E data below the deck in. First is on my Mantis. I know some of you don't use your Mantis to grind Venom, but I do because the time versus the costs and the rewards, I find my Mantis is the most effective than any other ship I have, including my Vidar Talios. The reason I say this is that I can get in 2 runs with a single buffs on each run enough Venom to max pull every day and have surplus Venom left over. To me, the cost of repairing my Mantis and being able to do full pulls just doesn't let me justify the cost of a run with my Vidar Talios or any other ship. So here's the crew that I run on my Mantis leveraging Enterprise E data. This works very well if you use the method that I show in my Mantis video for farming Venom. The link is above. On the bridge, I'll put Mavri as captain, Stan in an officer seat next to him, and 4 of 11 in the other officer seat. Because of my Mavri's level, he is more efficient than 2 of 11. But some of you may have better luck with 2 of 11 and 4 synergy because you either don't have Mavri or your Mavri is still tier 1. Below the deck, we can put Enterprise E data, Galinar, Laan, Paris, we need him for his mitigation, and Neelix, because we're flying a battleship and I wanted to get the extra isolic damage put out by it when the Mantis crits. With this crew and fleet commanders, I can get well over 930k in a run under 5 minutes with my Mantis. Another great way I've been using Enterprise E data below the deck is on my Voyager. I run the exact same bridge crew that I do on my Mantis, but what's different here is below the deck on my Voyager. Because this activity is mining, what I'll do is remove all of my non-cargo related officers. So Neelix gets removed, Paris gets removed, and Galinar gets removed. Then I put Tuvok below the deck to boost the cargo of my Voyager even more. This gives me maximum cargo on my Voyager for mining anomalies. And as you get up in level with your Voyager, you could technically use this crew to farm your resources, but you'll want to make sure that you put Paris back below the deck to get his mitigation. And then fill the rest of your open slots, if you have any, with damage modifying crew or additional mitigation crew to help extend the life of your Voyager. Now let's play around with putting Enterprise E data on the bridge. Remember, we're only going to use him as an officer since he doesn't have a captain's ability, so he won't go in the captain's seat. I had mentioned that we would probably drop him into some of our traditional crew builds. So looking at a traditional crew build that we've all used a lot in our PVE activities, let's see how we can use Enterprise E data in our PMCT builds, our primary sub-60 hostile grinding build. In this modification of our PMC-PMT builds, we're going to put Kelvin Pike in the captain's seat as normal, and Morio is going to be in the officer seat beside him, as we normally would as well. But now what we're going to do is we're going to replace our officers that we have to swap out based upon the hostiles we're hunting. In this case, Chan or Talan. We're going to drop in Enterprise E data instead of one of those 2. This is a very good build for regular grinding and put your Kelvin Pike and Morio back in playing field for 60 plus hostiles as well. I hear it's great crew to run on 61 plus hostiles. Enterprise E data is also a good supplement to your Janeway setup. With Janeway, the Doctor, and E data, this works very well on freebooters because of their firing pattern with Janeway in the captain's seat. And for those of you who have unlocked your Enterprise E Picard, using Enterprise E Picard, Enterprise E data, and the Doctor has been working extremely well for me with this setup to greatly increase my loot drops and reputation gain while I'm out grinding hostiles. This has been working well for me on freebooters, for faction grinding, Dominion grinding, and just knocking out my dailies in general. Part 1 of the Make It So arc didn't bring us any information on how we're going to be able to source Enterprise E data in the long run. So again, we're going to have to pay attention to our events and packs in the store for ways to acquire his officer shards. I did find, with the investment in the Elite Battle Pass and medium success in the auction leaderboards, I was able to unlock Enterprise E data fairly easily during the arc. Now that we've actually seen how we can apply data and use him, let's go back and re-review his advantages and disadvantages. I think our original list for Enterprise E data's advantages is still fairly solid, and that included his increased isolated cascade by a good amount, activates at the start of combat, which we do see that now in our battle logs, the android trait on ATAs, and it's actually a really nice increase to our cargo capacity below the deck. I think the one thing I will add to his advantages is he drops in very well into our existing crew builds. Now, what about his disadvantages? He's still limited to only non-Armada hostiles, so that hasn't changed any. But are there any other disadvantages that we could think of? Only other thing I could think of is that he doesn't trigger in combat, allowing us to leverage Christopher Pike's officer ability. In conclusion, Enterprise E data is actually shaping up to be a very good officer to have in our officer list. If you are able to acquire him during the arc, you're really going to find immediate uses for him. And for 61 plus hostiles, he's really looking like he's going to be a go-to officer. Enterprise E data is giving us the PMD build that will most likely replace your PMC-T builds, especially as you move into your 50 plus hostiles. Lower operations commanders will be able to do great without Enterprise E data, but that said, he's still going to be a great officer for those lower operation commanders. But as you move into the 50 plus operations levels, you're going to find Enterprise E data to be extremely valuable in your daily activities. Because of this, Oracle Station is going to rate Enterprise E data as a must-have. He's going to be extremely beneficial for your long game. Check out our website for more videos. And join us in Discord using the link in the video description to continue the discussion and get access to more resources. We hope you found the video informative and helpful. If so, please give us a thumbs up and share. We look forward to your comments and suggestions. Live long and prosper, Commander. This is Brightwood from Oracle Station, signing off.